You are very knowledgeable and you know what you're doing, and you've worked with countless numbers of people over the years to help manage and get rid of their pain.
I didn't really give people a blueprint and how to think about their pain in their body. This is a bigger question, why they're having pain. We discover why the pain patterns are happening. There's only 3 of them, so it's not very complicated. Almost all chronic back pain is due to extension problems. I would say 99.9% of them. Our brain is wired for short-term success. Our goals are to get from A to B as well as we can, but our brain is not as aware of what the long-term consequences. Chronic pain is an indicator that something is wrong right now. If you solve the source problem leading to that chronic pain, your pain will immediately begin diminishing.
You're listening to the Visibly Fit Podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Wendie Pett, and every week I'll give you holistic, practical solutions for everyday issues related to nutrition, healing, functional fitness, and behavior modifications. As a naturopath, fitness expert, and wellness coach for over 20 years, my goal is to empower you to reach for greater health and to rise up to your next level of living in mind, body, and spirit. You were created with greatness in mind. It's time to own it. Are you with me? Then let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to the Visibly Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Wendie Pett. It is a delight to be here with you today. Listen, we're going to talk today about chronic pain. And chronic pain is on the rise. 24.3% of Americans deal with chronic pain. That's millions of people on a daily basis. And it has just escalated and it continues to do so. And it's also kind of elevating the risk of suicide because people are in pain and they want a way out. And it's just really devastating to think about. But chronic pain can be solved. And I know that chronic pain, there's multiple reasons for it. Number one, I'd say the food, lack of movement, sedentary lifestyles, but also there's chronic pain from different injuries and accidents and that kind of thing. But it can be solved. And so I'm super excited to have my guest on with me today. I actually had him on a previous podcast. He's that good. And I know you will enjoy everything that he shares today. But he has a new book out called Pain Patterns, Why You Are in Pain and How to Stop It. And we're going to be talking about just the functional linking of old injuries that resurface and the current pain issues. And we're going to talk a little bit about the psychological impact, the healing process, practical applications, just the research that he's learned, just all kinds of things from fascia, involvement with fascia and pain and what it's doing to your body if it's tight and not if there's no release within that fascia. Anyway, it's a great episode. You're going to love it. So my guest today is none other than Rick Olderman. He was actually in episode 87 with me a while back, but he's a licensed physical therapist with over 25 years of experience. He's a best-selling author and respected speaker in chronic musculoskeletal pain. Rick transformed countless lives at his Denver clinic with his innovative approach to pain treatment. He's written multiple books, including Solving the Pain Puzzle, that shares cases from 25 years as a physical therapist and leverages his clinical insights to offer practical solutions. And he uses knowledge of movement, tension imbalances, and biomechanics to reveal connections between body parts, surpassing traditional treatment limitations. He is he's a very good communicator, and he has a skeleton with him that he did on the last episode as well. And so he will be showing the skeleton to give you examples visually of how you can adjust your body to alleviate some pain. So make sure you don't just listen to this podcast, but watch it on my YouTube channel as well. All right. Enjoy the show. You're going to want to share this with multiples of people that you know that are in chronic pain. But anyway, enjoy the show. Well, Dr. Rick Olderman, you are back with us here on Visibly Fit. We had you back, episode 87 when we were talking about hot tips on relieving chronic back and neck pain. But we're still going to be talking about some chronic pain and how to relieve that today. So I'm so glad you're with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Wendie. And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm not actually a doctor. I'm a master's in physical therapy. So
that's good. That's good. Wait,
I don't want to mislead
clear.
anyone.
That's good. All right, Rick. No doctor there. So, but you are very knowledgeable and you know what you're doing, and you've worked with countless numbers of people over the years to help manage and get rid of their pain. And so you have a new book out called Pain Patterns. And you really talk about why we have this pain and how do we get rid of it. And so let's talk about, why did you feel it necessary to write this book? You've written other books, you've done other projects. Why is this book so important?
It's a good question, Wendie. So one of the reasons is that while all the books kind of danced around my overarching philosophy, they're mostly filled with just the exercises to solve pain. And I didn't really give people a blueprint and how to think about their pain in their body. And so this is a bigger question about why they're having pain. So I felt it was really important to address the larger forces that are how we're built and the larger forces that are acting on your body that make these exercises necessary. And I have found, especially, I mentioned, we were talking prior to being on air here. And, I've been doing a lot of telehealth recently, and that's caused me to focus my attention on these pain patterns as the first thing I uncover when I'm working with people. And then we discover why the pain patterns are happening. But understanding what pattern your body is falling into, there's only 3 of them. So it's not very complicated.
Okay, what are the
understanding, 3? The 3 are an extension problem, a flexion problem, and a side bending problem. And we can go into the detail about that. Mm-hmm. But once you understand which of these patterns you have, then everything that you discover are things that are feeding that pain pattern. So it's not only important to fix the pain pattern, it's important to fix why you're having that pain pattern. They both go hand in hand.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's such needed because so many people are dealing with chronic pain and they feel hopeless and they can't function normally through life. And it just doesn't have to be that way. And so you're really offering a solution, but also hope, right? And so let's dive into these 3 different patterns and let's unpack them individually.
Okay. So it's important to preface this that this isn't just me coming up with this theory. All right. There's a lot of research that supports the elements of these 3 patterns. And so one of those researchers is Dr. Shirley Sahrmann in the field of physical therapy, has written a couple textbooks and been an instructor and so forth. She identified movement patterns. And then there's there's Thomas Myers. He's not a doctor. He identified, he's a fascial researcher. So he researches fascia, and he found superhighways of fascia that run through our bodies. And then there are also neurological reflex patterns we're born with that are patterns, involve patterns of movement in our body as well. And so in research, we tend to stick in our silos, right? Mm-hmm. Sahrmann is in movement and physical therapy. Myers is in fascia. And then, the guy who I discovered the neurological reflex patterns in was Dr. Thomas Hanna. So he stays in these neurological reflex patterns. But they don't speak to each other, but they all involve the body. Mm-hmm. And so because I was so unsuccessful solving chronic pain in my practice, I had to keep looking for, what am I missing here? And that led me to discover all 3 of these silos of research. The interesting thing is, Wendie, is that all 3 show the same 3 patterns that are occurring in movement, fascia, and neurological reflex patterns. So I basically put these 3 sources together into 3 patterns of pain. One is an extension problem, and that means that your back is either too arched or you have too many forces trying to pull your back into an arch. And we can go over a quick and easy test to determine whether you have this or not. The other is flexion problem, which is the opposite of an extension problem, is you have too little arch in your back.
When you say that, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What's the third?
And then third is the side bending problem, which the hallmarks of that are an uneven pelvis. So a lot of people are told they have a leg length discrepancy. as the source of their uneven pelvis or rib cage and so forth. And that's typically not the case. It's due to compensation patterns in our body.
When I rudely interrupted, I was thinking, first of all, what have you seen to be the most common? And my thought immediately, I jumped with the extension problem, probably because of such sedentary lifestyles that people tend to live. But I don't know. Is that the case?
You are absolutely right. So
okay, good.
Extension problems, almost all chronic back pain is due to extension problems. I would say 99.9% of them. And then acute back pain, a lot of those involve flexion problems because those are more acute disc problems.
Right.
If you have an acute disc problem, it's usually a flexion issue. And if you have chronic back pain, it's usually an extension issue. But if you have unilateral back pain on one side of your back or the other, or you have sciatic pain going down one leg or the other, or SI joint pain, that's usually involving a side bending problem because of the uneven pelvis nature of that.
Sure.
So you
Makes
can
sense.
have an extension problem and a side bending problem. You can have a flexion problem and a side bending problem. But you can't really have an extension and flexion problem because they're opposites, right?
Right. Well, someone that's listening right now, Rick, and they're in this chronic pain where they've, quote unquote, tried everything and nothing's worked. How would you go about evaluating? You're doing more of the telehealth, so you could do a call here like on Zoom or whatever, right? And you can walk them through a series of kind of assessments, if you will. Is that what you do? And then you can evaluate from there?
That's exactly what I do. And this is the beauty of understanding the body as a system rather than this compartmental thinking that we're trained in medicine to look at the body in, is that it allows me to see instantly what these problems are because I've just seen them so many times. So to kind of bring this home to your listeners, let's just do a real simple extension problem test.
Okay.
All right. It'll take 60 seconds. So what I want everyone to do is just lay down on the floor on your back. All right. A floor is better because it's firmer and that'll give you more feedback into your body. But if you're one of those people who just can't get down off onto the floor, or even worse, can't get back up off the floor after you've gotten down, then just do this on your bed. So what we're going to do is just have you lie with your legs straight on the floor and just feel any discomfort you have in your back. And then we're going to stay here typically for 30 seconds, but for the purposes of this podcast, we'll just shorten that up a little bit. Now what I want you to do is bend your knees so your feet are flat on the floor and feel the difference in your back pain at this point. And if you don't feel a difference, then go ahead and bring your knees all the way up to your spine and feel your back pain different there. So one of these two positions, either with your legs straight or with your knees bent in some way, will decrease your back pain or conversely increase your back pain. So most people don't even need to do this test because they know immediately that, oh yeah, I need my knees bent in order for my back to feel better. So what's happening when your knees are bent is that your back, low back, is actually flattening. You're flattening the arch of the low back. So this is saying that you have more pain when your low back is more arched, and you have less pain when your low back is flexed or flatter, or will remove the forces causing that arch. So knowing that you have an extension problem right off the bat, which means that your back is too arched, then you can start identifying, how can I do things differently? For instance, you mentioned sitting at your chair, right? So, if you're sitting at the edge of your seat, because most chairs are too big for people, if you're sitting at the edge of the seat to work on your computer, your back will almost always be arched into that position to work on your computer. So you're sustaining this arch in your back all day long. The easy thing to do would be to get a couple bed pillows from your bed, throw it in the back of your chair to bring the back up to you. And that way you can relax into those pillows, and you will notice that you get to flex your spine a little bit, and it feels delicious for people who have extension problems.
Well, and that's a simple solution. It's not something way out there. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Like, it's just simple. I think about, even standing up straight against a wall, right? To start to practice that good posture and to get the back in alignment. But yeah, anyone that has back issues knows when they have that moment of oh, that feels good. That's relief. Like, I've had a couple times where I'm it's, in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden I'm having some issues with my low back, and I'll bend my legs. I'm like, okay, I know I need to correct what's going on here. But it's your body tells you, gives you all the symbols or symptoms, and you got to respond accordingly, or it's just going to get worse and worse. So just something simple as sitting at your desk, bringing pillows so that you can scooch closer to the edge, and it's not going to be so arching all the time on your back and wreak havoc, right?
Yeah. So basically, you're bringing the back of the chair to you, so you actually have something to lean back against and relax.
Yeah.
And if you're a shorter person, most chairs are also too tall for a lot of people, right? So to solve that, then you would put a book or a box underneath your feet, which will bring your knees up a little higher, which will tilt the pelvis back and flatten your spine. And especially if you have those pillows there already, then you get to relax into something. But if you don't have those pillows there to do that, it's going to cause you to arch more because you'll be fighting that tilt that it's trying to throw you back into.
Sure. And you think of how many hours the average person is sitting in a day. They need to correct that. So that's good. That's something simple that people can look at. Let's talk a little bit about fascia, because fascia is all over our body, right? And my listeners have probably heard about the fascia blaster and different things like that, right? To really loosen up that fascia. And why is this so important? I mean, I know, I know, but I don't know that the listener really understands what fascia is and how, tight fascia can be a root cause of this pain and limit movement. So let's talk a little bit about fascia and how you can maybe guide my listener into helping that fascia be more mobile and more friendly, so you're not going to have the pain that you're dealing with.
Yeah, so fascia is simply connective tissue. Mm-hmm. And fascia is so intertwined with our muscular activity that even at our muscle cell level, we have fascia. And so in all of the mechanoreceptors that are in our muscles that tell us, a muscle's too long or too short, or there's too much tension or so forth, all of those are surrounded and embedded with fascia too. So you really can't talk about muscles without talking about fascia.
Yeah.
And you can't talk about fascia without talking about muscles because they're so intertwined. So I mentioned at the beginning that Thomas Myers identified superhighways of fascia that are running through our bodies. And so these are bands of fascia that can be dissected from the body as one contiguous unit. So we can have one whole slip of fascia that runs from the top of our head all the way to the soles of our feet as one contiguous piece of fascia. And so these superhighways become very important when we're thinking about chronic pain. So if you did that test that we just did a minute ago and you found that you have an extension problem, and now you understand that some of your back pain is due to excessive arching of the back, well, one of the bands of fascia that Thomas Myers identified was a superficial back line of fascia. And that runs all the way along the whole spine. All right. So you can imagine, because fascia is so intertwined with muscles, just imagine all the muscles along this area, and you've got an idea of what that fascia is.
Right.
So if that fascia is tight or contracted, guess what it's going to do? It's going to
pull,
start to contribute to this extension pattern,
mm-hmm.
or it'll make it harder for you to move out of the extension pattern because everything is shortened into this position or posture for your spine. So this is one of the ways that fascia contributes to our pain, is that it reinforces our movement patterns that we've chosen to do things. So I'm going to dive a little deeper here, if you don't mind.
Good, please do. And
okay.
By the way, if you are listening, I want to encourage you to watch, because Rick has his friendly skeleton example here that he's showing all these examples with. So it's good. It's a good visual. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have yet to name my skeleton. So
well, we need to. Let's do this right now.
You can have a contest to name my skeleton. Right in.
Okay, Sammy Skeleton. Okay.
Okay.
We'll come up with a name.
All right. So here's the really interesting thing about fascia is that there's a certain type of fascia called myofibroblasts. Fibroblasts are just the fascial cells, but myo indicates muscle, and so it has contractile capacities. It can contract up to 6 times more than regular fascia. Myofibroblasts are laid down in mechanically stressed areas of the body. our spine, because it has curves in it, those curved junctions indicate mechanical stress just by virtue of their architecture. Without movement or anything else layered on top, just because it's a curve, it has mechanical stress.
Right.
And so then we also have this big pelvis and the relatively small spine. So this also creates, the junction of these two things creates another area of mechanical stress. So in the low back region, we have what's called a thoracolumbar fascia, and that is chock full of myofibroblasts. So here's the interesting thing about myofibroblasts, is that like if I wanted to bend my elbow, my brain would send a nerve signal to my biceps to cause it to contract. And then if I wanted to straighten my elbow, my brain would then say, okay, relax that contraction, and the muscle would let go. But myofibroblasts don't respond to neural input. They respond to a biochemical input. It's called a cytokine, and it flows through our bloodstream like a hormone. And so this particular cytokine is called transforming growth factor beta 1, but you don't need to know that. So anyway, this cytokine is released when we are under stress, anxiety, tension, whatever. It releases the cytokine that floats through our bloodstream and then is picked up by the myofibroblasts, causing it to contract. So you could be telling your back muscles to relax, but because you have stress, anxiety, trauma, whatever, your myofibroblasts will continue to contract, even when your muscles say, we're done.
Okay, that makes me want to ask about old injuries, because obviously those cytokines are going to be, really heavy in that area. So let's talk a little bit about old injuries and why, maybe this reoccurring pain, even though you've been healed from the injury, but things, maybe stress causes it to flare up, or you know what I mean, and you feel that pain. So let's talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
So what we're getting into is another idea I put forth in this book. It's called functional linking. And so we have these old injuries, Wendie, that we think are corrected because we don't feel pain in them anymore. But often what has happened is our brain has created these compensation patterns to get around that pain instead. For instance, if you have plantar fasciitis in your left foot, your brain may say, well, let's just get off that left foot and be on the right foot. And then over years, the right side will break down, right? But the source of that problem is the left foot. And so my book will help you figure out what these patterns are. But your brain, and there's any number of ways that your brain can create these compensation patterns, because our brain is wired for short-term success. Our goals are to get from A to B as well as we can. But our brain is not as aware of what the long-term consequences of those short-term successes cause us.
Called the pleasure trap on some levels.
Really? Is that?
Yeah,
okay.
Like on different levels. I actually interviewed somebody, you'll have to listen, but the pleasure trap. So even when it comes to our the pain in our body, our brain wants to say, okay, do the thing that's simple and easy and pain-free, when really you're not getting to the root of the issue. And it may be more painful, but it's going to solve the problem. So we're just kind of wired to do that, get in that pleasure trap and want that instant feel good kind of thing. Yeah.
And you could also call it the lack of pain trap.
There you go. Right. There you go.
I just don't want to feel pain, so I'm just going to do this little shift.
It's the path of least resistance in that moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's great for a short-term, gain. But if you're not aware of the consequences of those short-term compensations, and most people aren't, they will catch up to you. And this is why people will, throw out their back when they pick a sock up off the floor, is that finally you've just added one more repetition onto that compensation pattern that you established decades ago.
That accumulation.
Yes. That it just says, okay, that's it. You haven't been paying attention. So this is how old injuries manifest in current pain. But I can't tell you, Wendie, how often I ask people, it's one of my pre-visit questions is, list all of your old injuries. And so many people say, oh, I don't have any. Oh, really? You've got chronic pain. You have no old injuries. And so I say, okay. So through the course of these tests, we uncover all of these problems. And I'm saying, well, why are you having this problem? oh, well, that's probably due to that old ankle sprain, but that was all, 30 years ago. No, that's actually why you're having pain now. And so we can link it like that. So just because you're not in pain doesn't mean that you're functioning correctly.
Yeah, that's
from
a
these
good word.
old issues. And so that's the connection between old injuries and current pain.
That is such a good word, Rick, because I think people, and I mean, I know I've gotten caught up in that trap or that thought as well. Like, I'm not in pain, I'm good. I've been healed from that injury, but then I do a similar move, or maybe within my workouts, and all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, I feel a little kink, a little whatever. Well, I never got to the root of that injury. So that's really a good word, that we've got to do our work. My father, this just made me think of this. He just had a knee replacement, all robotic AI, whatever. It's pretty amazing what they're doing. But I'm like, Dad, you've got to do your PT. He's like, but it hurts. I'm like, yeah, but if you don't do your PT, you're going to compromise, the healing process, and you're going to overcompensate on the other side. And so again, I think we just have to do the hard stuff in order to get to the solution. So let's talk a little bit about, you've shared a little bit about the three people that you've kind of gleaned from, but let's dive in a little bit more to that research and what you found, just kind of extra like, aha. I mean, you're in this space, you've been doing this for a long time, but something that caught your attention as you were doing the research.
Yeah. So it's when I got to the neurological reflex patterns that I had my aha moment. And was due to Dr. Thomas Hanna's work with somatics. And he created a field called somatics, which is a great way to reduce tension patterns in your body. But anyway,
and release some trauma. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So what I discovered there was they talk a lot about we have these reflex patterns. One is, and since we've already talked about an extension problem and a superficial backline of fascia in the body, we'll stay on that theme and talk about the neurological reflex pattern that is associated with both of those.
Great.
So when we're born with these deeper neurological reflex patterns that help us develop as humans. And one of those is that when we're crawling on the floor, right, and we need to lift our head, that's a reflex pattern that helps us do that. So in order to lift that head, we have to arch our back a little bit and engage all of these muscles along the spine and the neck in order to lift that head. Then when we move into walking, we use these same set of muscles to help us be upright and be able to stand up on our feet. And this also comes into play if we're walking in a dark forest and we hear a twig crack, we immediately come to attention to see what's going on. Your brain isn't saying, this would be a good time for you to stand up a little bit taller and look around. It's an instantaneous reflex pattern. So these reflex patterns never go away. They're just overshadowed by functional demands of our day. But we're always going to have these reflex patterns deep in us. So the Landau reflex pattern, because it involves all of these back muscles, involves the same set of muscles as Thomas Myers identified in our superficial backline. And it identifies the same set of muscles that compose the extension problem movement pattern that Dr. Shirley Sahrmann wrote about too. And so when I learned about these, and there's two other reflex patterns associated with the other two patterns too. When I learned about these, that was my aha moment, just like, oh, this is why some people are more resistant to changes in their body than others, is because they're tapping into a reflex tension pattern rather than a fascial, just a length issue, right? And we can get people to change how they move, but they have a really hard time of letting go of old patterns of movement.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is due to our brain's control over these movement patterns reflexively.
And wouldn't you say that possibly it's due to the overstimulation of that, and it's self-induced overstimulation, right?
Oh, sure.
A lot of times.
And so like all that stress and anxiety from your daily work, right?
Right.
And this plays right into those myofibroblasts too, right? So now you're reinforcing that reflex pattern, and you've got those myofibroblasts that are being activated because of your anxiety or stress, right? So you've got a double whammy of neurological fed pattern and then a myofibroblast chemically based pattern contraction. And then you've got your whole movement. Well, I've always sat in my chair just like this. ever since I was a little kid. And my mom and dad always told me to sit up straight and bring your shoulders back. And so that's what I'm going to do. That's what I've learned. So that's how all of these three things blend together. And and that's what this book is about. It's kind of explaining how this happens. But that's only the first half. The second half is a workbook.
I love
work
that.
through all of these problems and discover what they are in you.
Well, I love that you have a workbook attached, within your book, Pain Patterns, because it's not just reading the information, it's dissecting it for yourself and observing your body and writing it down and, journaling, doing some deep work on just, have I been injured in the past? Is this why I'm doing this? Or do I have extra stress in my life? Just all the things. It gives you an opportunity to really think through why your body is responding the way it is. So I love that. And I just love that. It's so good. What about, let's see, what are some common misconceptions? Because a lot of people think, I can just go to chiropractor and it's going to be all good, one and done. Or I don't know. What are some misconceptions maybe around chronic pain?
Yeah.
Not that chiropractors are bad. We love chiropractors.
Yeah. So I think some misconceptions are that, if you've been in pain for, 40 years, it's going to take at least 40 years to fix it. And I found no. Chronic pain is an indicator that something is wrong right now. And what has happened is that no one has figured out what that right now thing is. I have found in my experience that if you solve the source problem leading to that chronic pain, your pain will immediately begin diminishing. I don't care whether you've had it 40 or 50 years. That has nothing to do with how fast you can solve your pain. It just has more to do with the type of information you've been receiving that hasn't worked for you.
It's good.
And usually that information is based in component thinking approaches, trying to fix tissues or specific vertebra, orientation, rather than understanding how all of this is coming together as a system. Our bodies work as systems, but we're not trained in medicine to heal people that way.
Yeah.
That's where we've been missing.
So that's so good. I love that because that, again, gives someone hope. Like, oh my goodness, I've been in this pain for all these years, but I can get this fixed immediately. And it's not going to take the 40 years. It's not going to take even 5 years. It could start to heal right away. And so I think in terms, with my patients, I'm doing a lot of the whole food plant-based eating and the movement where you're just doing a lot of moving isometrics and that kind of thing. And but I think a lot of times my patients get stuck with their stinking thinking, right? And that's the same thing with their chronic pain. They get stuck with their stinking thinking, and it keeps them from actually living in the body that God intended to begin with, that pain-free body. And so what would you say to that person that has been so kind of just pre-programmed, if you will, and they're not able to release? Like I talk about releasing unhealthy emotions to release unhealthy weight. Well, it's the same with about chronic pain, right? So let's talk a little bit about that release and maybe what you would say to somebody that's listening right now that's so stuck in their thinking that they're having a hard time releasing. So therefore that chronic pain remains. And that inflammation.
There's two things to answer that. So one, we'll go through another really quick test together.
I love this. Yeah.
All right. So just clasp your hands together.
Okay.
Like this, like you're praying. And look down, Wendie, at which thumb is on top. Which one is it for you? Is it your left or your right?
My right. My right.
Okay. So your right thumb is on top, and that's your normal way of clasping your hands together.
Yeah.
Now, without looking at your hands, and folks, do this at home too, because this will really follow along. Because this will
just not when you're driving.
Yes. Yeah. Not when you're driving. Unless you've got a self-driving car.
Right, there you go.
Okay. So now unclasp your hands and put them back together with the opposite thumb and fingers on top instead. And check your work and make sure you did that correctly. Now, just hold your hands like this for just a moment here. And automatically your brain is sending you a signal that this is different. And then a judgment will come that because it's different, it's wrong. And then if it stays like this for a little while, your brain will then generate an emotional response to this. This is getting really frustrated to hold my hands like this. I don't like this at all.
Right. I'm going to go back to this.
Yeah, this is stupid. This isn't going to change anything, right?
Yeah.
So what this is teaching us is that if you're changing something, you can unclasp your hands.
Oh, yeah.
Again,
I'm sorry.
if
I've
you
still
want.
got them clasped.
So what this is
I'm still
showing
praying,
us.
Rick.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what this is showing us is that if we change the things that are maybe causing our pain, our brain will immediately send out these alert signals that, oh, whoa. This isn't how you said I should be doing things. We've been doing this for the last 50 years. No, this is wrong. We can't do that. Your brain doesn't know that change is good for it yet. And so it's going to set off these alarms to say, this is bad, this is wrong, and create emotional responses to that. So knowing that that's going to happen is really important to fortify yourself that when you're changing your life, whatever aspects of that is, you're going to get resistance from the inside about those changes. But that resistance from the inside does not indicate whether that is good or not yet. It's just saying that it's different, not necessarily bad.
That's so good. I love that, Rick. Like you're talking my language. I love that. A lot of my patients will say, well, this is hard. And I'm like, no, it's not hard. It's different. And so it's the same thing. It's just different. So we immediately say, well, it's hard. I'm not doing it. Or, so that's a good word. So very good. Well, I could talk to you all day. This is fantastic. I can't believe we've already talked this long. It just has flown by. But I really want people to go and get your book. And so you can go to Rick Olderman, which is RickOlderman.com. And I'll put that in the show notes, or Amazon, and get his latest book, Pain Patterns. And I'm so excited for people to get their hands on this book and to take the assessment and to reach out to you if they are in chronic pain, and maybe work with you online and get to the root of that pain so that they can live the life that they were called to live. So thank you for your time, Rick. What would you like to kind of close this interview out with? Is there maybe a message on top of what you shared that you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for your work too, Wendie. I mean, we're in the same, we care about the same things.
Right.
So my message to your listeners would be that often people feel that they are broken, and because no one has been able to solve their pain, and they are not broken.
Right.
They just haven't had the right information yet. And so if you read this information, I can almost guarantee it will be new information you've never heard of before. You've never heard of the body thought about like this before. And I think it could be exactly what you need.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rick. And maybe we'll have you on again. But hey, if you have not heard his first podcast with me, it's episode 87. But make sure that you share this episode with your loved ones, your friends, that are in chronic pain that need this information. So again, thank you, Rick. Blessings to you.
You as well.
Well, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Visibly Fit. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Rick Olderman. He is just full of information, and I'm always fascinated when I talk with him. He knows his stuff. So if you are in chronic pain and you're looking for a solution, then I believe he could really assess the situation and get you into a better place. But check out his book, grab it. Go to rickolderman.com. It's called Pain Patterns, Why You're in Pain and How to Stop It. And that's what we want. We want to stop that chronic pain, right? Now, we also know that chronic pain can be due to chronic inflammation. That is why pain is there. But a lot of times it's from the food that we eat. And it's not just from injuries or the way in which our body is not cooperating with us, so to speak, but it's the food that we're eating. And so we need to look at that as well. And so if you're looking for a program that will get you on track, help you release unhealthy weight attached to probably some unhealthy emotions, then go to getvisiblyfit.com and let's work together. Let's get you into the Visibly Fit 7-week accelerator program and get you to release that unwanted weight and get your body strong and your mind clear and your spiritual walk in a great place. But I have testimonial after testimonial, and so you can check that out at my website. But go to getvisiblyfit.com and let's get started today. If you're listening to this live time, We are in the month of December, and yes, I know we're going into the holiday, with Christmas and then New Year celebration and such. But listen, this is the time to do it. This is the time to jump on board and get a jump start before the new year. I promise. It will help you not overeat during the holiday time and get you on track for a better future quicker than the New Year time. So anyway, go to getvisiblyfit.com and or email me if you have questions, and I'd be happy to walk you through it. All right, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. God bless you. And again, go to rickolderman.com if you want to check out his book. Grab it and send this episode to friends that you know that are dealing with chronic pain as well. Okay? All right, God bless. We'll catch you next time.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show. So thank you so much for tuning in. I love spending this time with you. To learn more and get more free resources, just head on over to wendiepett.com. And thank you in advance for sharing this episode and this podcast, following and subscribing not only to this podcast, but finding me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you are, I'm probably there too. Until next week and our next podcast time together, make it a visibly fit day.